baby Holly has been missing for 40 years, certainly not a baby anymore. This week, she was found alive.
A family reunited 4 decades after a brutal crime. A child known as baby Holly has been found 42 years after she was reported missing.
A decades-old mystery has been resolved almost 40 years later, finally bringing closure to the grieving family of Holly Marie Clouse. In 1980, Harold Dean Clouse and his wife, Tina Gail Lynn, along with their baby, Holly Marie, decided to relocate from their hometown in Florida, moving west to Houston, Texas. Upon leaving Florida, the young family was never to be seen or heard from again, leaving their families wondering for years what happened to their beloved loved ones. Modern genealogy testing finally cracked the case, answering a 40-year-old mystery of the young couple whose bodies were found slain in the woods. The body of their year-old daughter Holly was, however, not found. While one mystery was solved, another mystery began. The Clouse and Lynn families had finally come closer to finding out the truth, but the question remained, where was Holly Marie Clouse? Was she alive, or did she suffer a horrific fate as her parents did? Who was responsible for destroying this young family all those years ago? Welcome back to Mysterious 7, and today we are diving into a decades-old cold case of Holly Marie Clouse. 40 years of looking over their shoulders, the family of Harold Dean Clouse always remained hopeful that they would find their beloved son and brother. The disappearance of a young man and his wife and their young daughter had always haunted them, leaving them to wonder what had happened to this young family. Not knowing whether they were dead or alive, the families continued tirelessly to look for their loved ones, wondering every day what happened. The nightmare was finally brought to an end in late 2021, when forensic genealogists confirmed that a set of remains found back in 1981 were those of Harold Dean Clouse and his wife, Tina Gail Lynn. But now the question looming over everyone's head was, where was their 1-year-old baby, Holly Marie Clouse? 40 years later, we finally have an answer. In the summer of 1980, Harold Dean Clouse approached his mother, Donna Casasanta, telling her of a job offer he had received in Houston, Texas. He was promised a year-round job, something that he felt he needed to pursue to support his wife Tina and their young child, Holly Marie. The young couple finally decided to move to Texas, saying goodbye to their families in their hometown in Florida. They gathered all their belongings and headed for the road, eager to pursue the future that awaited them. They settled down in Houston, looking forward to their new life in a new city. One of their pictures shows the couple with bright, smiling faces, with baby Holly sitting between her happy parents. No one knew that this would be one of the last times they would be seen together as a family. The families of Harold Dean Clouse and Tina Gail Lynn did not hear from the family for several months after they moved to Houston. The Clouse and Lynn families grew increasingly concerned and set out to search for any signs as to where they could be. They pursued the search for years, never giving up hope on finding the young family. Unfortunately, they were never to be seen or heard from again. The young family had virtually disappeared and had left no clues about their whereabouts. This was extremely distressing for the families, who constantly wondered why their loved ones had disappeared. Harold's mother, Donna, remarked driving on the freeway once, passing a young man who bore a striking resemblance to her missing son, Harold. She said, "I used to tell myself he's out there somewhere. He'll ring the doorbell and say, 'Hey, Mom.'" Despite being constantly reminded that her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchild were never to be seen or heard from, the Clouse family never gave up hope. Decades would pass, and Donna would never give up hope on being reunited with her son. Thanks to the advancements in genealogy testing, the Clouse and Lynn family finally came to learn what happened to their beloved son and daughter. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences revealed that one phone call helped solve a case that had remained cold for 40 years. A family that had disappeared, leaving no traces behind, was finally found decades later. On January 12, 1981, a disturbing discovery was made towards the end of Wallaceville Road. The bodies of a young man and woman were found in what was at that time a heavily wooded area. After the discovery of the bodies, an investigation soon followed, and a forensic artist was brought in to make reconstructions of the victims. Harris County's forensic artist, Mary Mize, made several pastel reconstructions of the victims, but since they were new to Houston, no one recognized them. Asking around also proved to be a dead end. As DNA testing was also not well developed in the 1980s, the police were unable to find a conclusive match as to who the people were, and the bodies remained unidentified. The families therefore could not be informed, and so the case remained cold for up to 4 decades. In 2021, Allison Peacock, a senior forensic genealogist, was contracted by Identifiers International, a team of genealogy experts. She was brought in to assist with this case that had been cold for 40 years. Peacock revealed that it took the team of forensic scientists several hours with the remains to get a good idea as to who these people were. The team led by Peacock added new information to a genealogy site called GEDmatch.com, which finally found them a match. Soon after, a phone call was made to a family who had been waiting on closure for up to 4 decades. The senior forensic genealogist, Allison Peacock, was tasked with making a call to the Clouse family to inform them that it was their beloved son and brother Harold who had finally been found all these years later. Allison dialed the family and asked, "Do you have a family relative that disappeared a long time ago?" Brooks, Harold Clouse's sister, who had answered the phone, immediately responded saying, "Yes, I have a brother that disappeared about 40 years ago, Harold Dean Clouse Jr." Allison broke the unfortunate news to the family. "We found him. He was murdered." The closure was not easy for the family, who insisted on knowing the details of the murder of their loved ones. The only information that could be provided to them at the time is that they had found his body in January 1981, just a year after Harold, his wife Tina, and his baby Holly moved to Houston. Harold's mother Donna, although broken by the news of learning the details of her son's horrific fate, was glad to have known what happened before she passed. She didn't want to die not knowing what had happened to her son and his family. Brooks, who had just learned of her brother's unfortunate tragedy and the grim fate both him and his wife Tina had suffered, was also completely shocked. She asked Allison if they had found the baby, to which Allison's first question was, "What baby?" Brooks insisted that they had a small baby, less than a year old, whom she thought would be found along with her parents. The missing baby Holly now created a new tangent to the case once again. While one mystery was solved, another presented itself. The body of her granddaughter, Holly Marie Clouse, was not found along with her parents. While the family grieved the loss, finally coming to terms with the tragedy the young family suffered, it begged the question, what became of baby Holly? Was she alive? Or did she suffer a fate as bad as her parents, Harold and Tina? What was meant to be closure to a 40-year-old mystery ultimately spawned a new one. The quest to find what happened to Holly Marie Clouse was now underway. If Holly Marie was still alive, she would be turning 42 years old. The family, in pursuit of solving this mystery, began to work with family history detectives to help find answers to this mystery which never seemed to be ending. Once the story of the Clouse family aired in late 2021, new leads began to emerge regarding the identity of baby Holly. Forensic genealogists also pursued leads and followed up on any new tips that came in. The team led by Peacock had discovered Harold and his wife. Now they continued to search for their baby girl. The investigators were flooded with many calls from middle-aged women who believed themselves to be Holly. It was increasingly difficult for the team to follow up on these clues as decades had passed, since they were unsure of even the tiniest details, like eye colors. A photo of Tina Lynn and Holly Marie unsurfaced a few weeks later, which was subsequently shared with various authorities. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children assisted with the search by working on an age progression picture to try and envision how Holly would look now. Several people proved to be close matches. The senior genealogist shared that there's one woman whose phenotype is fairly similar to Holly's, which she deduced by the chin shape, eyes, and nose. 3 other women who came forward and also claimed to be Holly purchased ancestry DNA tests to try and rule themselves out. Peacock remained hopeful throughout this investigation into the whereabouts of baby Holly. She strongly believed that science would be the answer to this 40-year-old mystery, with only time being able to tell. And she was right. In early June 2022, after more than 40 years of unanswered questions, baby Holly Marie Clouse was finally found. Genealogists were finally able to trace the match to a 42-year-old mother of 5 in Oklahoma. The woman, who we will refer to as Holly, has chosen to keep her real name private from the media. Investigators in 3 different states conducted an exhaustive search of records, combing through piles and piles of data, which finally led them to find out the truth about Holly Marie Clouse. Early in June 2022, the new Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit with the Texas Attorney General's Office made a public announcement regarding their findings, finally bringing the much-needed closure to a mystery that had haunted the Clouse and Lynn family. Although the families had to process the murders of Harold and Tina, the mystery of baby Holly finally brought the grieving family some long-awaited good news. A little more than 40 years after disappearing without a trace, baby Holly Marie Clouse was finally found to be alive. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have offered to pay for reuniting Holly with the Lynn and Clouse families. What happened to baby Holly? Why didn't she suffer the same fate as her parents? How did she manage to get away? The situation brought investigators more questions than it did answers. As the mystery was finally nearing some sort of solution, the questions only became more pressing. As more information began to reveal itself, a clearer story was being painted as to what happened in rural Houston all those years ago. Holly was found to be left at a church in Arizona, and then was raised by a family who had nothing to do with her disappearance and are not considered suspects in the case. The 2 women who brought baby Holly to that church were described to be part of a nomadic religious group, wearing long white robes and walking barefoot. Many believe these women to be part of a cult, as they had indicated strong beliefs in some sort of religion. Not much was revealed about the women who brought baby Holly to that church in Arizona. From whatever little they spoke of their religion, it was learned that male and female members were separated, and all members had to practice vegetarian habits, including maintaining a vegetarian diet and refraining from using products that are not vegan. This nomadic group was believed to have traveled around the southwestern United States, especially in the states of Arizona, California, and possibly Texas. There have been alleged sightings of the group in Yuma, Arizona during the early 1980s. The woman in these white robes would be seen around various towns begging for food. In 2021, after the bodies were confirmed to belong to Harold Dean Clouse and Tina Lynn, authorities took a hard look at the details of the case once again, trying to understand the circumstances surrounding this horrifically violent and senseless crime. In either December of 1980 or January 1981, the Clouse family received a phone call from a woman who had identified herself as Sister Susan. The woman explained that she was calling from Los Angeles regarding the couple's car, stating that she was hoping to return it. After conversing with the woman for a while, she began to share with the family that Tina and Harold had joined their religious groups, deciding to leave their families and traditional society. The woman, who called herself Sister Susan, also claimed that the couple wanted to rid themselves of all their possessions and live minimally within the religious community. She also allegedly asked the Clouse family for money to return the couple's car to Florida, where the Clouse family lived. What started sounding suspicious now sounded extremely out of character for the young couples, especially Harold, who had left for Houston intending to make more money to support his family. The family agreed to meet Sister Susan, but were suspicious enough to call the police. The meeting took place soon after, where 2 or 3 women and 1 man arrived to meet the Clouse family, all dressed in the same white robes. The police report describing this incident has not been found, therefore no advances have been made in the investigation. It is common for a lot of material and case files to go missing, especially when the case goes cold for several decades. The authorities are still looking for this police report, but have made no progress. Texas officials reported on finding closure almost 42 years later. An official spokesperson for the police department stated, "This investigation highlights the hard work and collaboration of multiple law enforcement agencies working together across the country, which demonstrates the importance of continuing to investigate cold cases both in Texas and the United States." Authorities state that while finding Holly Marie alive and well 42 years later is not something that should be diminished, it should not distract us from the horrific crime that her parents had been victims of 4 decades earlier. An official said during a press release, "While we rejoice today that Holly has been found, and families that were looking for her for decades still rejoice, we are still looking for suspects in the case." The authorities also shared several facts with the public and media, hoping that the progress in the case urges people to come forward with more information that could help them crack the case. While the pursuit for justice is still underway, and there are still no leads, there was some good news with finding baby Holly all these years later. She has been in contact with the family over the phone and hopes to meet her biological family in person soon. Harold Clouse's mother and Holly's grandmother were relieved that she had finally learned what happened to her son and his family 40 years earlier. Despite learning of her son's life being cut short, Donna Casasanta was happy to hear that Holly was alive and was happy to finally speak to her granddaughter all these years later. While the family will be reunited, the investigation into what happened to Harold Dean Clouse and Tina Lynn is still ongoing. As with many cold cases, the missing police report has stifled the investigation, and no arrests have been made. If you or anyone you know has any information about the murder of Harold Clouse or Tina Lynn, please contact the Texas Attorney General's Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit at 512-936-0742. While the hunt for the killers of Harold Clouse and Tina Lynn continues to unfold, their families have finally received closure after more than 40 years. Although it wasn't the news they were hoping for, they learned that baby Holly was alive and was now a mother of 5 living in Oklahoma. We hope Holly gets to reunite with her family in person soon. Tell us what you think of this mystery. Share your thoughts in the comments below, or hit the subscribe button to stay updated on many cases like these. We hope to see you again.